and I'm so excited to see all the teams here, but I'm not going to talk to you about how you get rich with crypto. What I want to talk to you about is something that's much more powerful than that, and that is how blockchain is going to be able to drive transformational social impact, and particularly in emerging markets. So I first heard about blockchain in 2010 when my son told me to buy Bitcoin. And I didn't buy any Bitcoin, none whatsoever. And then he came back to me in 2006 and he said, Mum, did you buy Bitcoin? And I said, no. And he said, by then it's worth maybe $3,000. And he said, now I'm telling you this, Mum, Bitcoin's built on blockchain and you have to understand about blockchain because it's going to transform everything. So I started to learn about blockchain, read about it. It was like completely confusing because it's so different to anything that we've grown up with. And then one day after I'd been studying it for months, I was sitting there and I was thinking about the Banda Aceh tsunami in Indonesia where 200,000 people lost their lives. They were washed to sea. And my company was in there for the reconstruction. So I went there and I saw. And it wasn't just that 200,000 people were lost. No one knew who was lost. No one knew who was back on land. All the land records were gone. All the health records were gone. All the bank records were gone. Suddenly people started flocking in and sending money, and no one knew whether the money was getting to the correct recipients or not. People traffickers were able to come in because no one had any identities. And I just had that eureka moment about blockchain that changed my life, which was, just imagine if all of the identity, all of the health records, all of the bank records, all of the land records were all up secured on a blockchain and then you could reconnect with them. It wouldn't have changed the tragedy, but it would have made the reconstruction so much easier. And I realized that there was another story to tell because this was back in the crypto ICO days and everyone was getting very excited about making money. And I realized that the story that needed to be told is how blockchain technology can have a transformative impact on the poor and the disadvantaged and the vulnerable. And that's what I want to talk to you about today. So technology, the technology we have now can transform lives of people everywhere. 70% of the planet has access to a mobile phone, and that means we can access 70% of the planet and we can connect them in ways that have never been possible before. So I'm just mastering this. Can someone help me with the clicker? Oh, here we go. Okay, so just in terms of non-crypto use cases, there are so many ways in which blockchain is able to apply itself to so many different functions. So we know about the digital assets and fast payments in supply chain, in provenance, removing friction out of supply chains, in healthcare, and we've seen that absolutely escalate through the pandemic. Mobility, NFTs, which everyone's getting excited about, green energy and carbon trading, and microgrid solar energy trading, startup fundraising, tokenizing welfare payments for the people who've been disadvantaged through the pandemic, voting, government engagement with citizens, land titles on the registry, philanthropy, universal basic income, and play-to-earn games. All of these things are built on blockchain. So what I'm trying to think about is the bottom billion, those people who are not connected. So thinking about how we can use technology to stop preventable deaths in women and children. How we can use technology to give identity to the 1.5 billion people in the world who have no identity. How we can create financial inclusion, which is one of the biggest issues that remains for women's access to funds. And I'm not talking about unbanked, because why do you need a bank account if you can have a wallet on your mobile phone? Microgrid energy trading. People in villages can have a small solar panel and they can trade energy and supply energy to other people in the villages using micropayments. Tokenized carbon offsets. There's a lot of noise at the moment about ESG and climate change, and blockchain can actually enable people to transparently tokenize and trade their carbon offsets. This is an example of a project that I worked on in a country called Papua New Guinea, where 85% of the population are unbanked and they don't have access to electricity and only 2G mobile phone. And what this device did in proof of concept was enable people to have an identity connected to the blockchain through the mobile phone in this device, improve financial inclusion so they could send and receive money, and they could use this to micro trade small amounts of solar energy between people in the village. So I just want to quickly take you through some of the issues that blockchain can actually help solve in terms of social transformation. So I mentioned identity. 1.5 billion people don't have access to an identity. And if you don't have an identity, it's a prerequisite for all inclusion, for services, in some countries for getting married, for sending and receiving welfare payments. So financial inclusion, 2.5 billion don't have access to financial services. Are you here because you want me to talk quicker? Or you're just listening? I didn't know, sorry. So, yeah, land assets and registration. People are unable to convert their land to value, and then people would be able to borrow money against their assets registered on the blockchain. Welfare and donor payments, and think about the amount of money that governments are trying to send to the poor post-pandemic, and the smart contracts can ensure that those funds actually meet the intended recipients. So agriculture supply chains. There are so many ways in which blockchain's being used for agriculture in developing countries, from insurance to ensuring that farmers receive a fair deal for their produce, for taking the friction and making immediate payments throughout the supply chains to the provenance of those goods. That is Ethiopian coffee that you're receiving in your coffee cup in London. So democracy and voting and what people call liquid democracy, governments interacting with the people in a safe, secure, transparent way. And then green energy. We need to move from carbon funds to green energy, and both microgrid solar energy trading and carbon trading can be enabled by blockchain. I also want to talk about healthcare. We're coming out of a pandemic, and what we've seen during that pandemic is how the applications of blockchain in healthcare have absolutely accelerated and exploded. So we've seen more efficient, transparent payment systems, financial inclusion for poor families, direct health incentive payments, provenance of PPE equipment. Can you remember that map, the Johns Hopkins map with all of the red blobs that kept on growing in the beginning of the pandemic? That was underpinned by a blockchain secure data sharing platform. It allows secure data sharing for health data. And the future, think about this, people are now working on the future where you hold your self-sovereign identity and your entire health record in the palm of your hand on a mobile phone, and you can permission people to access that data. That does two things. One is it means that the doctors who are looking after you have access to your entire health record right across your life cycle, which they don't now, because your health data is everywhere but in the palm of your hand. It's in the radiologist, it's in the hospital, it's in the doctor, it's in the insurer. It can all be there. But health data is an extremely valuable commodity, and you can monetize your health data. And people are building health data exchanges, and people can be rewarded for making their data available on those data exchanges, and this is going to be particularly important in genomic data. So technology gives everyone a voice in a way that's not been possible before. But what I want to talk briefly about before I finish is just the potential of digital assets to be able to transform the lives of the poor. So 95% of the money in emerging economies anyway is private, and this is Christina Siegel-Knowles from the Bank of England. And she's saying if new forms of digital money can be made safe, they could potentially contribute to faster, cheaper and more efficient payments with greater functionality. They could increase the resilience of payments, and they could have long-term benefits for financial stability. So people at the highest levels of the financial system can see the potential of this. And then the other big news, which we've heard right around this conference and we've seen in the Chain Analysis Global Crypto Report, is it's in the emerging markets that we're seeing people embracing this technology. The top 10 countries, users of digital assets, are all emerging markets. And we've even seen Afghanistan go from something like number 110 to number 20 because of the crisis and because people were turning to digital assets, both to protect their savings and also to be able to transact. And so COVID has exposed the need for these low-cost transfers, and stablecoins is a way of being able to facilitate, without the volatility, these kinds of transfers. So digital assets promise emerging economies and countries with high inflation an opportunity to both be able to preserve their wealth and to be able to transact in the marketplace. And we're seeing this in Latin America, Africa and East Asia, where people are turning to digital assets to preserve their savings when their own currencies and inflation is out of control. This also would be of tremendous benefit in humanitarian settings. So the two most important things humanitarian people do is, one, logistics, getting people along supply chains from one place to another, and the other is sending money. And so if you had a stable coin that could be sent to people in a humanitarian crisis quickly and easily only with the use of mobile phone, it would both save money because the cost of those transfers at the moment through banks and Western Union is extremely expensive, but also allow humanitarian agencies to be able to improve the efficiency and speed and pace and transparency of their operations. So after all the excitement, I think we still have to admit that we're not there yet. This is a technology that's in its infancy. And so we have to ask questions about, will the processing speeds be fast enough for the poor? Will the technology for the poor support stablecoins? What will it cost the poor? Because this is obviously a problem with platforms like Ethereum, where the gas fees go up and down. You can't possibly use that as a basis for getting money to poor people. So how will issuers comply with regulations if they develop these kind of coins? And how will financial systems with limited foreign exchange reserves, which is in the case of many of these emerging economies, actually adapt to digital assets? But I believe, and I want to share this with you as my last thought, that the future of financial inclusion is here with digital assets, with mobile phones, and with a simple mobile phone, people around the world have the possibility of participating in the global financial system from which they have been excluded. And that's incredibly powerful. So I hope just by those few ideas I get some of you to not get excited about DeFi and NFTs, do get excited about that, but think about how this is a technology that can move the privilege and make it more shared amongst both the planet and the people and bring the vulnerable into the economic system. So thank you very much for listening to me, and I hope that you've taken something away from that. Okay.
Shreya, can you please come on the stage, please?